Hey all, Red Foz here. Today we're going to talk about fast castles on Arabia. If y'all don't know about me, I'm a top 50 player who plays pretty much exclusively fast castles on Arabia. And this tier list should be thought of, kind of at that level of play. So this is a tier list for the highest level of play, top 500 plus. If you're thinking about this tier list and you're at a lower elo of play, like maybe you're at 1200 elo or something instead of 2k5, some of these civs might be better or worse on your tier list, but I'm going to make this tier list exclusively for the top 500. Honestly, it won't change too much if you're at a lower elo of play, and you can probably take this as a pretty good rule of thumb. So let's dive straight into it, starting with the Celts. I'm going to put the Celts in the B tier. They actually used to be an A tier fast castle, kind of low A tier. But recently, the unit that we're going for, the Woad Raider, has received some nerfs. It's quite a bit more expensive now, especially in terms of food. And that really hurts us in a fast castle. The type of fast castle that we'll be playing with the Celts is a 23 pop fast castle. Actually, most of the fast castles that I'm going to talk about today are going to be 23 pop. Those get a castle age time of between 14 and 1430 if you're doing it properly. And they hit your opponent very quickly. And your opponent is often fighting your units with feudal age units. So if we think about the matchup between a Woad Raider and a feudal unit, like let's say a big ball of feudal archers, the Woad Raider has some really good options here. Since we have a castle defending our resources at home, we can often choose our opening strategy to be to raid, to ignore the archer army, which we won't be able to kill at this stage of the game, right, when we place our castle, and go force either our opponent to full wall or res wall. And if they don't do that, we could probably win the game on this point by killing a lot of villagers. So we open with raiding, and then we play towards our next composition, which is Woad Raider Mangonel or Woad Raider Siege Tower. If we've killed a good number of their archers, we can play Siege Tower and just basically zone the remaining archers that they have. If they have a big ball archers, we're going to have to play Mangonels, and Woad Raiders play really well with both of these units. And it also uses a lot of the Celt bonuses. The main reason why Woad Raiders play so well with Siege is because they are very fast and have a high attack value. This means they're incredibly good about defending Siege against things like Light Cav or Knights. Units that are slow and have low attack values are not very good at defending Siege units, and often your Siege units will get sniped. So the Woad Raider sitting at, I think it's around 75 HP, really good speed, and a very high attack value of like 12 or 11 or 12, I forget, but quite high. It's great at pairing with Siege, and that composition that we're playing will scale pretty fine throughout the game. Something like Siege Tower, Woad Raider, Mangonel is going to do fine versus their Crossbow Mangonel or Crossbow Monk Mangonel. So let's move on to the next fast castle, and that would be Franks. I'm going to put Franks in the D tier. The Throwing Axeman has very poor feudal matchups, specifically versus feudal archers, and it also doesn't really contribute anything when your opponent gets to castle age. This is called scaling, the idea of, okay, maybe our unit's good against feudal units, but how does it do as the game scales on? How does it do if your opponent gets to monks, if they get to a big ball of crossbow with mangonels, big ball of crossbows with ballistics and mangonels? We have to think about these things when we're doing a fast castle. And as the game goes on, our unit gets worse and worse as we're playing Throwing Axeman. So that's called negative scaling. It's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind. There are some FCs that have positive scaling, some that have neutral scaling. That would probably be like the Celts. And then some that have negative scaling, where the longer the game goes on, the worse we feel about the unit that we're going into. So Throwing Axemen are quite weak. And honestly, I just do more of a Huang rush with Franks, which is like a Knight Siege monk play. And that feels okay. They have some okay bonuses, mostly their foraging bonus, helping us, and of course their free bloodlines helping us play that. But that play is incredibly weak to early aggression with archers. And usually if Huang was playing it, he would actually play a little bit of feudal age and add some skirmishers to kind of push that aggression back and then play towards his composition. But since I don't do that, Huang rushes in general for me are quite low tier. So a D tier pick. Let's move on to Burgundians. So Burgundians, I think we got another B tier civilization. Burgundians have an incredibly powerful unit in the Coustier. And again, I'm going to be doing a 23 pop fast castle drop. going for their unique unit, the Coustier. If you think about the Coustier versus feudal units, it absolutely shreds feudal units. It's going to destroy feudal scouts. It's basically a much cheaper knight that produces quite quickly and has, I think, a base, like a starting attack value of 28. It's a charge attack that it does once and then loses. That charge attack is incredible. It means if your opponent tries to defend with spears or archers, you can really quickly pick off those archers and then go, back to killing villagers. It's an incredibly OP unit. It also has plus 15 HP for free over a night. So again, just a long list of absolutely crazy stats on this unit. It's an overstated unit, which is what we like to see when we're going for fast castles. The downside of this unit is getting back to that idea of scaling. As the game goes on, do we feel comfortable playing this unit? If we're fighting like a monk civ and they're playing like double, triple monastery defense, and we weren't able to get in, then we feel a little bit sad because we've invested into all these cavalry units. And although they are cheaper than a normal knight, they are still quite effectively countered by monks. So because of the monk defense possibility, especially Redemption Monk, where our mangonels will no longer be able to turn off their monks, this is quite weak. Even if they don't have mangonels, monks can be brutal versus this unit because they can flood their knights towards us. And then if we try to defend our mangonels, they can just convert our guys that are trying to defend and get a lot of value with their monks. So because of that scaling problem, this is only a B tier strategy. I think it would be a little higher than the Celts though, because that unit's quite expensive. Okay, another D tier civilization, that would be the Teutons. FC Teutonic Knight, as much fun as it is, I've done it many times, it is not very real. This unit has very terrible feudal matchups, mostly versus archers. Technically, if you do get the second infantry armor, which usually we can't afford in these types of fast castles, the archer units will only deal 1 to you. But it is quite slow, which is very bad for infantry because it means that initial raiding victory condition versus archers is not really something that we can go for. Archers can also chase us down on the map, so if we try to raid, they can literally faster than us and they can run us down and kill our units. It's not a good FC, and because of that, I do not play it. If I was playing it seriously, I would not play it as a FC into Teutonic Knight. Instead, I'd do a 23 pop, either a Monk Rush, which would be okay, or a Huang Rush, with Knights and Siege and Monks, which would also be okay. Fairly decent, which puts it in, the D tier. Anytime we're going towards a Knight Siege push, without building, feudal skirms to kind of push back their archers, we're going to be incredibly weak to that opening. If you are a skilled Huang Rusher, which I would not call myself a skilled Huang Rusher, many of these civs in the D tier could get bumped up to, maybe B tier, maybe A tier. But again, this is for me, how I feel about the strats, and the fact that I'm not a terribly skilled Huang Rusher. So let's move on to Goths. So Goths, we got our first A tier FC right here. FC Huskarls is actually quite decent. If we think about the feudal matchups, obviously we are going to destroy feudal archers. The only maybe problem would be that we are a little weak to feudal scouts, but actually if you look at the stats on a Husk, it's kind of like a slightly expensive, slightly higher, more attack longsword. So if you think about longswords versus feudal scouts, you probably shouldn't be that worried about the longsword player, and we shouldn't be too worried about the Huskarl player. As long as they group up their units versus a feudal scout opening, they should be able to deal with that. And then the really nice thing about Goths is that we move into a slightly positive or at least neutral scaling FC, in that we are going to play Huskarl plus Monk versus their Knight plus Monk. And as long as they're not, in a Redemption Atonement Civ, we feel pretty comfortable playing this on as the game extends. The really nice thing also is that sometimes when you're playing monks, it's difficult to force fights because people will spam either defensive structures and hide in their TCs or towers or whatnot, and Goths are incredibly good. The Huskarl is incredibly good at just walking under the TC, right-clicking on it, and forcing a fight versus the person playing the defensive playstyle. So you can always force a fight and get conversions with your monks when you're playing Huskarls. It's a quite decent FC. They also have a fairly good bonus for FC, basically +1 vil. So because of those two reasons, it is a mid or low A tier civilization. Hey, we got another mid or low A tier civilizations. That would be the Vikings. I'm going to put them slightly lower than the Goths. And this is FC into Berserker, or Berserk. The Berserk is actually it's like in the middle of the road for infantry units in terms of cost. And it, again, is quite fast and has a high attack value. So in many ways, it's similar. It's not as fast as a Woad Raider, but it does have a high attack value and is quite good at defending siege. And in the current meta, where siege towers are quite strong, you can play something like Berserk plus siege tower to chase down archers, or go kill mangonels. So there's a really good way for your infantry unit to contribute in the coming archer plus mangonel versus mangonel war. So in this war where there's archers and mangonels, and you have your own mangonels, sometimes infantry can struggle to contribute because they can't really run at the siege. But if you add a siege tower in, you're always able to dive that siege, kill it off, and then get your mangonel ball rolling. So I often, depending on the number of archers, I'll either open, my comp will either be mangonel plus berserk into siege tower mangonel berserk, or straight, if they're light on archers, I'd play straight siege tower berserk, and then add the mangonels after. So again, very nice composition. I'd call it at least a neutral scaling composition that we're going to be playing with the Vikings. And they also have a pretty okay, it's actually not as good as it sounds, bonus for FCing. They do get, handcart and wheelbarrow for free, which it's kind of anti-synergistic because we often don't place too many farms in FCs, but they eventually can be an okay bonus. So okay bonus, nice unit. That's an A tier, low A tier FC. Okay, now we are getting into, I think, the first S tier FC. So I've been playing Spanish more and more, and they've been creeping up on my tier list more and more. Basically, Spanish are very close to like my ELO high for FCs. So like a very solid FC, incredibly powerful. And that we are going for a 23 pop FC into Conquistador. The Conquistador is an entirely overpowered unit. I find it funny that this unit exists and that more people are not mad about it. Many people are mad about some of the unique units that I might play with, but they often don't talk about conquistadors as much as I feel like they should. This unit is just insane. It's basically a cav archer that has more HP, more pierce armor, and does like triple damage, all for free over a standard cav archer. It also gets kind of ballistics for free because it has a high mischance. And if you think about its matchup versus feudal units, it's going to destroy feudal scouts, and it will also destroy feudal archers. And those archers, once they get to crossbowmen, they still do not counter your unit. This is the most powerful part about Conquistadors. They still do not counter your unit when they get to crossbow plus bodkin. Even though they outrange you, they don't have ballistics yet. And we can just run. If we are in their base, we can run around their base, shooting their vills, and they will have no answer to that. They'll have to try to like quick wall us and trap us. That could maybe be an answer. That's incredibly difficult versus a cav archer unit. And we can always dance. If the archers are trying to press us, we can always, like the crossbow are trying to press us, we can always dance and get a ton of value from dancing and just shooting back at the crossbowmen. So again, an incredibly powerful unit. I'm going to put it probably on the middle or lower tier of S. So a mid or low tier S tier civilization. Ooh, we got another S tier civilization. And then, of course, our scaling composition that we play with Conquistadors is Mangonel Conquistador, which, even if they get ballistics and a bunch of mangonels, it's so hard to stop. The most hilarious thing about Conquistadors is that if they do finally get ballistics to answer the units running around their base, they still have an answer to you because you can do anti-ballistics micro at high level and then kill their crossbow or their mangonel, whatever you're fighting, using that form of micro, which I think is quite silly that this unit scales so nicely. It's a positive scaling composition. The only downside is Spanish, why they're not like the top of S tier, is because they're a little weak to incredibly heavy archer pressure in feudal age. But if you learn my build orders, that's actually one of the easier forms of pressure to resist. So we're not too worried about it. Next is Portuguese. This is probably a high S tier FC. Incredibly strong. We're playing for a 23 pop castle drop FC into organ guns. If you don't know about organ guns, this unit absolutely destroys all archer units, all feudal scout units. It's just crazy. Yeah, so if we think about our feudal matchup, we're absolutely clean, free, and clear. Technically, they can do an extended feudal scouts play, especially if they're a civ like Turks. That's actually a good counter to Portuguese, picking Turks and doing an extended feudal scout play. But unless you're a civ like Turks or maybe Magyars, the extended feudal scouts play will actually feel quite weak versus organ guns. Organ guns do really well versus feudal scouts, unless you have a very strong bonus for them. And the problem about not extending your feudal age versus a Portuguese player versus an organ gun player is that you're not going to have all the resources you need to get full upgrade light cav plus mangonel. That's what you have to play versus Portuguese. You need both armor upgrades, you need attack upgrades, you need bloodlines, you need husbandry, you need everything. And since extending your feudal doesn't work, you'll never get to that. If you're fighting organ guns, you'll never get the resources that you need to get to the composition you need to beat organ gun plus redemption monk. Obviously, mangonels counter organ guns very nicely and quickly, but we will always be placing a monastery with Portuguese and playing organ gun, redemption monk, castle drop. That's the only composition I play versus pretty much everything in the game. It's the simplest in terms of like theory. It's the simplest composition to play: organ gun, redemption monk, castle drop, in that order. And it's incredibly difficult to stop a composition like that. Whatever you'd say probably loses to one of those units that I described. So yeah, so brutal. Again, this unit, I think it's funny that a unit like this exists. It gets all of its upgrades for free and it's so powerful. Okay, let's move on to Bohemians. I used to rank Bohemians much higher, but they've received a number of nerfs, and now I'm just going to put them in high A tier. The unit used to be absolutely OP. It had a lot more HP. It did a lot more damage, especially to mangonels. But now it's a fairly modest unit. It is quite strong. If we think about its feudal matchups, it can lose to extended feudal scouts versus any civ, actually. But if they haven't dealt a lot of damage to us with their scout opening, which usually scout openings don't deal that much damage to us, or at least they deal less than an archer opening would, we will just play into spears plus Hussite wagons. And Bohemians have incredible spears, so we're not actually that worried about extended feudal. And then in terms of scaling, in terms of like when they get to Castle Age and start playing their Castle Age compositions, they again need to get full upgrade light cav plus mangonels, and our composition is just cheaper to get into. We're going to play Hussite wagon plus redemption monks. If you don't know, redemption monks, especially with the Bohemians, incredibly cheap to get into. I personally think redemption monks should not be that cheap to get into. Maybe we should take a look at those redemption monks. They seem a little bit overpowered to me. But yeah, that composition that we're going to play, it's going to be really hard to deal with. Okay, let's move on to Poles. Poles, yeah, this is really interesting. This is probably a, boy. Yeah, it's really close. Probably a low B, high C. So we'll just put in high C. Poles have actually some okay bonuses for fast castling. If you overload everyone onto stone, you're going to get a ton of gold from that, which means your castle age will just be much smoother. It will be really impossible to pressure you because you won't have to sell stone to click up. You'll just have enough gold to click up for free. And then the unit that we're playing, the Obuch, is the reason why it's in C tier. It's not super hot. The Obuch, if we think about, as we were talking about earlier, what makes a good infantry unit for defending siege, it would be 1, a high attack value, and 2, good speed. The Obuch loses on both of those accounts. It has a low attack value and low speed. It has 8 attack, which is kind of low for an infantry, actually quite low for an infantry, and it has low speed. It is quite tanky. It has a lot of HP and a lot of armor, but in fast castles, we much prefer speed and damage over HP and armor in general. So because the HP and armor doesn't help us protect our mangonels or our monks, whatever we're playing. So because of that, the unit doesn't really have a composition. It's also quite slow. So again, versus feudal units, it could easily get chased down by your opponent's archer units if they're controlling them nicely. And that raiding victory condition that we love to play with infantry as our first victory condition is kind of turned off because it's so slow. You can get first armor and second armor, and then you only take 1 damage from feudal archers, but usually we can't afford that in an all-in. So yeah, quite a flawed FC, but it is quite, I play it a lot. I play it sometimes. It's fun to play. Next, Italians. Ooh, we got another low C tier FC. I do like, or I'm think it's okay-ish to play FC into Genbos. The downside of Genbos is that you need to get Fletching and Bodkin to beat feudal archers. Also, feudal archers, if they just continue to make feudal archers and kind of play suicidally with their units, where they don't care if you kill a couple units coming in, they can just click next to your ball of or your couple Genoese crossbow that are trying to cross the map and deal damage. And if you shoot at them, they'll lose the unit, and then they'll continue to approach you. And then you'll shoot at them again. They'll continue to approach you, and then they'll be on you, and they'll kill all your Genbos, even though you killed a couple feudal archers. So that's a really big problem for non-mobile archers. All foot archers, every single one, even strong foot archers like a Turk, like a hand cannon, are weak to what I just said. If they just play kind of suicidally and just don't try to micro with you and kind of ignore the fact that you have a little bit more range than them and just click next to you, it can really make it difficult to walk across the map with Genbos. Now, the nice thing about Genbos is they do scale kind of nicely in that they deal 2 damage to Mangonels. So when it eventually becomes Crossbow Mangonel versus Genbo Mangonel, we can feel as though we can contribute a little bit more maybe than a crossbow in the Mangonel War. So that's nice, but it's really not that hot of a unit to go for. And it also requires, Fletching and Bodkin, which we don't always, we're not always able to afford in an all-in. But they do have quite a nice bonus for FCing. And if you wanted to play it either Genbos or Huang Rush style, I'd kind of put it in the same spot, bottom of C tier. Both of those sound fairly okay, or kind of bad. not super hot, but it's a fine strategy to go for. Okay, next let's move on to Sicilians. This used to be like a high A or maybe even a low S. Now this is a really interesting FC, especially in the past, where it could be an S tier FC, but only if they didn't know you were doing it. So this is where this tier list gets a little complicated. I'm going to pretend like our opponents don't know that we're going for the FC. So they're not, for example, Sicilians are very weak to blind counter FC into like Redemption Monk or Knight Monk. They don't like fighting that, even in the past when they had the more OP Sergeant. So for me, once I gained a reputation for Sergeant rushing people, the FC went from like S tier to like C tier. So just them knowing that it was coming reduced it a lot. All these FCs so far that are in the S tier, it doesn't really matter if they know it's coming. It's still an S tier FC. It's still incredibly difficult to stop. But I'll assume for this tier list that your opponent does not know that it's coming, and I'll rank the civs based on that. So with that in mind, let's talk about the current Sicilian FC, assuming your opponent doesn't know it's coming. It is quite rough. I would put it maybe at the top of C tier. This unit, can be okay versus feudal units. It does have 2 Pierce. But it is quite slow. This is kind of reminding me of an Obuch. In the past, if they didn't know it was coming, it could be an S tier, mainly because archers dealt 1 damage to it if you just got first armor upgrade with Sicilians. But now you have to get second armor upgrade for them to do that. And the unit's a little bit more expensive than it used to be. And for those 2 reasons, I'll put it at the top of C tier. It is okay. It's an okay FC to go for, specifically if your opponent opens feudal scouts. But if they open feudal archers, they can pressure you, shoot your farms, and you don't really have an answer to that. And that's a big problem, especially since, again, your unit is quite slow, so they can chase it down and kill it on the map. We can't even go for that raiding victory condition that we love to open with strong infantry FCs. We love to open with a raiding victory condition, and we don't get to do that with Sicilians. So this unit is quite lost. It's had a large fall from grace in terms of FC meta. It's quite unfortunate, the state of Sicilians. Okay, and in terms of scaling, doesn't really scale into Castle Age, doesn't really contribute defending monks or mangonels. It has low attack value and low speed, so it's quite bad. Let's move on. Lithuanians. I think we have which would I rather play, Sicilians or Lithuanians? Both of them sound bad. We'll just put it at the top of C tier. This is, again, quite a subpar FC. Going for the Litus, a 23 pop into Castle Drop Litus, is not super hot. By the way, the Sicilian FC is not a Castle Drop. I didn't mention that. It actually is a 23 pop with a donjon at home, which is nice because it gets you some faster timings where you can build your unit in feudal age before you versus castle drop FCs where you have to build it once your castle's up. But still, it's quite weak. So Lithuanians, again, 23 pop into Lightus. They have an okay bonus for FCing. They have the plus 100 food. But the unit is quite strong, especially versus feudal units. It has really high attack value. It's really fast. Its weakness to spears is actually not as big of a deal as you might imagine, because you can always just spread out. If there's 10 spears on a wood line, we can just go hit the gold and our opponent, or go hit their farmers. If you have a fast cavalry unit, often you can hit their farmers if they're in their base. And they really don't have any answer to this, except like full res wall everywhere, which is sometimes difficult to do in all-in scenarios because there's a lot going on that they have to do. Lightus, the main problem with Lightus is not their matchup versus feudal units. It has a perfectly acceptable matchup there. It's the moment that they get to monks. This is a very expensive cav unit. And if they get, 2-3 conversions and an all-in, that could be the end of the game. They're very weak to like something like Monk Knight defense or Monk Light Cav defense. Cavalry units really struggled to defend a mangonel without giving your opponent's monks a ton of value. There's really no way for cav units, unless they have incredibly high burst damage like a Coustier, to defend a mangonel from a knight running at it and not get converted. There's no answer to that. If your opponent right clicks on your Lightus with their monk and then right clicks on your mangonel with their knights, you're going to have to give them Lightus or get pushed back. And getting pushed back in an FC is death in general. Okay, let's move on to Romans. So it's what's called a negative scaling composition, which is rough for the unit. But if they do an extended feudal, you'll feel pretty happy. So Romans, this used to be an S tier, but in the most recent, not most recent, but like 6 months ago, 8 months ago, the Scorpions got nerfed quite a bit, and then Romans actually recently got nerfed. So there's a lot of reasons why this strategy has kind of fallen from grace. I would put Romans at the top of A tier right now. They're incredibly strong. This is actually the first like non-Huang Rush, non-Castle Drop FC that we're looking at. This is what's called a 21 pop FC, 21 no loom actually. It's an incredibly fast timing. You sell your stone here. You're not even gonna place a tower and defend yourself. And the whole idea is that our units basically are Scorpions that we're going to be going for with the Romans, pretty much only cost wood. So as long as we're able to secure one wood line, let's say they open some feudal archers, we could drop one siege workshop at home, get one Scorpion out. We've secured a wood line now, and now we can just sell wood to get the rest of the Scorpions. And while we're doing that, we sneak 2 vills up to their base. We actually sneak 2 vills like while we're going up to Castle Age and drop 2 siege workshops at their base. And then we make a ton of Scorpions and a ram and really quickly rush their town center down. Romans also have a bonus where they have basically stronger Scorpions, especially versus feudal scouts because they have less minimum range. That's incredibly useful, an incredibly useful bonus for the Romans. And it means that going extended feudal scouts is actually quite terrifying versus the Romans. And then in terms of scaling, they can play something like Redemption Monk Scorpion versus the coming, Mangonel Knight that's coming, and they can feel pretty comfortable there. So I'd call this a neutral scaling FC, if not maybe even a slightly positive scaling FC. We have a good scaling comp, we have good timings, we have a really good timing attack. So Romans are a very solid FC. The recent nerfs have hurt them, and that's the only reason why they're not in S tier, because Scorpions are just not as good as they used to be, and it can lose to all-in feudal scouts, especially versus a skilled player, someone who's more skilled than you are. A more skilled player. A lot of these FCs, you can be a less skilled player and still have a really good win rate, like Portuguese or Spanish. But Romans, you have to be a more, if you are fighting a more skilled player, you're going to struggle probably. Like a much more skilled player, like plus 300 elo or plus 400 elo. Biz. That's another C or D. Let's just put him at the bottom of D. Biz. Cataphract is not a good unit to go for. It has scaling problems. It has problems versus feudal archers. It's quite expensive. All of these reasons mean it's just not a good unit to go for, which means we're forced onto one of two things, either a Huang Rush or Scorpion Rush. Scorpion Rushes are quite bad at the current meta. They used to be a little bit better before the nerfs. And Huang rushes without the skills that Huang has to know when to mix a range at home to make some skirmishers to defend, when to send 6 vills forward to rush up a siege workshop forward. Huang rushes are quite hard to learn, in my opinion. It's not that they're bad. It's just they have a very difficult, what's called a feudal flow chart, which is all your responses to feudal age. The Biz Huang rush, in theory, should be fine. Especially since he sometimes will actually play camels to defend his siege. In theory, Biz have at least one bonus for that. But Huang rushing is quite difficult, so it is at the bottom of D tier, in my opinion. Again, I love Huang, just to be very clear. Huang's a very cool guy. He's very nice. And if you don't know, Huang is actually the reason why I'm playing Age of Empires, because I love anti-meta strategies, but it is difficult to learn. Not that it's weak. I'm not trying to say it's a weak rush. It is a very strong rush, but it takes a lot of time investment. And yeah, this tier list is reflecting that. You know, you could become a pretty good conquistador rusher quite quickly, much faster than you could like a Biz Huang rusher. And that's why Biz is in D tier and conquistadors are in S tier. So let's move on. Ethiopians. We got, I think, this is really interesting. It's either top of B or bottom of A. I'm going to put them in the very bottom of A. Ethiopians have a really strong FC bonus. They get basically plus 400 resources for FCing, which is absolutely incredible. And they're a unique unit, if you think about it, in terms of what we want out of an infantry unique unit. We want it to be fast. We want it to have high attack value so that it can defend siege or be put in a siege tower and snipe siege. And because of those reasons, Shotel warriors are actually an okay unit to go for in an FC. They are incredibly squishy. They don't have much HP. They don't really have any armor, and we don't get armor upgrades for them. But they can do the 2 most important things in an infantry FC, which is open with a raiding victory condition where you ignore your opponent's archers and go hit their base. They're also quite good at breaking into bases. And then 2, when the scaling part of the FC comes into play, when we have to play, siege tower Shotel Mangonel versus their crossbow Mangonel, the Shotels feel like they're quite strong there as well. So a solid FC. The only downside is that the unit's fairly expensive on food. That's not great. But they do have some bonuses to make up for that. So I'd put them right at the bottom of A tier. Okay. We got Malians. This used to be like an S tier strategy back in old school siege tower days before the ungarrison nerfs or hop in and out nerfs, like T9 used to say, the in and out strategy. But now I'd say they're probably, are they lower than Celts? That's rough. Yeah, probably a mid-low B tier strategy. The main reason, if you think about it, like a Woad Raider and a Gebetto are actually quite similar, and most people, and I would agree, that a Gebetto is much stronger than a Woad Raider to go for. It's cheaper, it's heavier on gold. The one difference, and the reason why I rank it lower, and it also has a ranged attack, which is so good. It's so useful at defending siege because of that ranged attack. It's like doubling the effectiveness. The only reason it's lesser than a Woad Raider is because the garrison nerf has made them kind of anti-synergistic with siege towers. You can no longer play like, Gebetto's siege tower Mangonel versus crossbow Mangonel. It just doesn't feel that good. So you're stuck playing like just Gebetto Mangonel versus crossbow Mangonel, which honestly feels worse than playing Woad siege tower Mangonel versus crossbow Mangonel. So it has a bit of a scaling problem. Honestly, I'm being a little bit too mean to it, but the unit is much better in general. I think honestly, more that I talk about it, even though it does have that scaling problem where it doesn't really synergize with rams or siege towers, it is a much more solid unit, and it's heavier on gold, which is always good, versus a Woad Raider. So it should be above here, and I think I would prefer it over Burgundians. So a solid FC. We run into some scaling problems, but we get to open with our raiding victory condition for infantry, and then play and get our siege workshop forward because of that raiding victory condition, where we draw the archers back, and then play Gebetto, Mangonel versus whatever they're going to throw at us. Okay, let's move on to Berbers. This one isn't as bad as it sounds. I'll put it at the top of C tier. I prefer Berbers over any of these. So FC Camel Archer is okay-ish. It's not great. It's okay. The main problems with Camel Archers is that they need a lot of upgrades. They need fletching and bodkin to be able to fight feudal archers. And then another problem with them is they have a fairly low production speed, which is not what we want in a fast castle unique unit, especially when it costs wood and food gold. We really would prefer to pump. We can pump them out really fast if we want, like old school Hussite wagons or, a Rambai. We can pump those guys out. Have a big ball of scary units really fast. But we don't get to do that with Camel Archers because of their low production speed. But the nice thing about Camel Archers is once you do get your upgrades in the coming Crossbow Mangonel versus Camel Archer Mangonel, you can see how much of my thinking is devoted to the coming Crossbow Mangonel versus unique unit Mangonel matchup, because that's pretty much where most of my games go. Sometimes they go to like Cab Archer Mangonel versus Camel Archer Mangonel, but obviously you'd never play a Cab Archer versus a Camel Archer because Camel Archers have a ton of bonus damage versus mounted ranged units. Anyway, in the Crossbow Mangonel versus Cav Archer Mangonel war, they do have a very high attack value of 7, so they deal 3 damage instead of the Cav Archers 2 damage to Mangonels, which is great. So you can kind of run around and snipe. We can also do that Conquistador thing where if we get into their base, we can kind of run around and snipe vills and force kind of bad fights from them. So it's an okay unit, held back mostly, I'd say, by its production speed. Although if it had a good production speed, it could even be all the way up in A tier, but it doesn't, so too bad. Okay, next on to a very, very controversial FC, and in my opinion, a very silly FC that should not exist in the game. Where do I want to put it? It's either S or A. I'm going to put it in high S, and I'll talk about why. So this is actually my highest ELO FC. This is the Church Rush. It's either a 20 no loom or a 21 no loom, which is an incredibly fast feudal timing. And then the way I play it is that I sneak around 9 villagers. Right when I click Castle Age, I send the villagers out from my town center. And the moment that I'm in Castle Age, I will be building 2 churches. If everything goes well, I'll be building 2 churches on their town center. Now, if you don't know what a fortified church is, it's an incredibly silly unit. I think it is the most problematic unit in the game. It even beats out Conquistadors, Organ Gun, Aratha. I'm part of the pro player Discord, so I know that the people are aware of how problematic this unit is, and potentially in the future we may see some nerfs to it, which would be great. This is the fortified church is incredibly toxic, and even used in meta play, I think this unit is incredibly bad for the game. Because it's basically a castle that costs 200 wood and builds instantly. So that's a big problem. Or you could think of it like a guard tower that costs 200 wood and builds instantly. It also deals castle amounts of damage to a town center. One fortified church deals the exact same amount of damage if it's fully garrisoned with 5 vills to a town center as a castle. So when I build 2 churches on your town center, you will not get to Castle Age. You will either have to extend your time in Feudal Age, or you will have to do a desperate repair and have no money when you get to Castle Age. And if you extend Feudal, I'm picking up relics with my really nice warrior priests. I'm adding some vills, adding some farms, and then I'm going to play, if you play like archers versus my warrior priests, because warrior priests absolutely shred Feudal scouts. Then I'm going to play like monks versus you with all this gold that I have. And I'm just going to play like monk castle drop with these free castles that I get, the fortified church. And that's really hard to deal with because then you need farms, and I'm just constantly castle dropping your farms. This composition, from a theory perspective, makes a lot of sense. The downside to it and why it's not an S tier, also, if they try to counter FC you, you may not know this if you don't watch a ton of my games, but very few people nowadays play feudal versus me. I'd say about 30% of my games are versus feudal, and 70% of my games are versus counter fast castle. I wait in terms of like civs that are strong for me, and this is the main reason why Armenians are my highest elo civ, around 2k 570 something. The reason why they're up so high up there is because they're one of the hardest civs to counter fast castle. So if you're thinking you're going to counter fast castle and play whatever Mangadai on me, or that's the most common thing that people do, or counter fast castle me and play, Ratha or organ guns or or conquistadors, any of these really strong things that most people just play against me. Most people just play my own strategies against me. Um, then I will just church drop like your gold. After you place the castle, I'll just place the church on your gold. I'll pick up all the relics, and then I'll play like a ton of monks and churches at home to defend myself. And then I'll just continue to castle drop wherever you're taking resources with my churches. And that can be really hard to deal with, even strong civs like Portuguese and Spanish. So Armenians have an incredibly prickly counter fast castle. They just get so much. They get basically 6 free relics if you try to counter fast castle them in most scenarios, if you know how to use them. So yeah, incredibly. I hope the fortified. I actually intentionally. This is a long point on Armenians, but I intentionally made my church rush strategy and promoted it because I do not like churches, and I'd love to see them tweaked in some way. I don't like the design of that unit. It's the strongest defensive structure in the game by far. It beats Korean guard towers. It beats Bulgarian cred posts. It just blows those out of the water because it doesn't cost stone, builds instantly. No way to deny it. It builds freaking monks. Anyway, you can tell how I feel about our fortified churches. We should stop talking about fortified churches. Let's move on to the Turks with the Janissary. So Janissaries used to have a little bit more range a long time ago. But now they're at 7 range, and they're quite modest, honestly. I would put them probably at the bottom of A tier. Yeah, probably at the bottom of A tier. So if your opponent opens scouts versus you, you feel really comfortable, walking across the map, because the moment you get like 3 Janissaries, you can just walk across the map pretty much no matter how many scouts they have. And then they'll be really light on archer numbers. Usually if they open feudal scouts, and you can kind of snowball the game from there. This unit is also incredibly good, the Janissary, at breaking walls. It has a very high attack value, so it can break through palisade walls or houses very easily. And again, before your opponent gets ballistics, it feels very uncomfortable for them. This is kind of a similarity between Jannies and Conks, and a lot of the units that I go for also are Rambai. Before your opponent gets ballistics, they don't feel very comfortable fighting the unit because we kind of get ballistics for free because we have a very low hit chance, which means those missed shots will hit our opponent when they're trying to dodge. So a solid FC, honestly, I think I got it demoted a little. It's top of B tier. A solid FC, but it is very weak to an archer opening. Again, any of the foot archer FCs, they can always chase you down on the map with a big ball of feudal archers if they know to do that. So a weak FC versus an archer opening. And because of that, it's in the B tier. It actually has a pretty okay scaling composition, probably a neutral scaling composition. They're playing crossbow mangonel versus our Janissary mangonel, and we can snipe their mangonels much easier than they can on ours. So it's okay for that reason. Could even be positive scaling, but it costs a lot of food, so we're not going to have as many Jannies out as they have crossbow out. So for that reason, I think it's perfectly fine in the top of B tier. It's quite fun though. I mean, I'm not talking about this, but a lot of these B tier and C tier FCs, especially like Celts, Malians, Turks, I have so much fun playing them. Freaking Ethiopians, so much fun. So we need to make a fun tier list one of these days. Okay, let's move on to Georgians. Let me just drink a little bit of tea. It's hard to talk for this long. Georgians. We are going to be doing a 20 pop, no loom. No loom, to be very clear, is when we click from dark to feudal. We will be getting loom when we go from feudal to castle. But an incredibly fast castle with the same victory condition as the Armenians. The reason why this is probably a lower tier FC, probably not too much lower, but lower than the Armenians, is because maybe a couple ticks lower, maybe like there. It's just because they can't pick up all the relics on the map, and they don't have as quick of an answer to a scouts opening as the Armenians do. So again, if you just get like 3 warrior priests and they have like 5 scouts, you feel really comfortable. If you have 3, monks that come out of your fortified church, you don't feel that comfortable versus 5 scouts. You don't feel comfortable picking up relics on the map. you don't feel comfortable scouting their base and figuring out where their units have expanded, their villagers have expanded to, and continue to castle drop them with your churches. So yeah, Georgians, for that reason, are not as good, but they do get up quicker, which is why they are still a really high. They're easier to do at faster uptime, which means you'll have fewer losses to your opponent, like massing archers at home in anticipation for your church drop. That is actually one of the ways that both of these strategies can lose. There's other ways to play these. You can also boom and pick up relics as an opening, and then church drop right before your opponent hits castle age. That's also an incredibly powerful way to play this, and it would counter some of those blind counter strats where your opponent is just massing their feudal army at home and putting like outposts around their base and trying to never allow you to church drop, which I do believe is the best counter to church drop. Just like never let them church drop your base to begin with. But that is much easier said than done when there's 9 vills walking out of the fog of war and just surprising you on whatever, a gold mine or your TC. It is kind of luck-based to stop this, even at the highest level of play. So, yeah. Let's move on to... Ooh, do we have another S-tier civilization for general play? Man, I so want to do it. I'm going to do it. This is the lowest S-tier civilization. It's probably the one that is least expected in this. But recently, I've been doing a ton of training, or I've been doing a ton of theory crafting and practice in TTL maps because I'm giving some high-level players some of my strategies and helping them, bring them into the tournament scene. And I also did a lot of practice with Magyars on KOTD, although I didn't ever share this with the Magyar FC, with the Viper for KOTD. But I actually thought Magyars was an S-tier FC on the KOTD map, specifically because Magyar Hussar, if you look at its stats, you'll start to see why I value this at S-tier. It has 80 HP, it has 12 base attack, 2 pierce armor, it attacks as fast as a knight, which is slightly faster than most units, and above all, it costs, I think 80 total resources, which is just like half price knights, basically. It's also heavy on gold, so we can afford it even under a lot of pressure. And it has an incredible production time of 12, which is much faster than most cab units. It's actually closer to like infantry units, 12. So we can have a lot of Magyar Hussar right on the field. And again, units that are fast, especially on really open maps like KOTD Arabia. The main weakness of fast melee units is full walling. But if full walling is a little bit harder, they'll be able to get in, and then they can just run around your opponent's base doing loops. If they've spread their spears out, you're just going to kill whatever spears are spread out. If they keep them all in one spot, you'll just kill everywhere else in their base. There's no answer to this if it gets into your base. It will kill your villagers under farms, which is what I call sharking. It'll just shark all your villagers off of your farms. There's no answer to this except to be full walled. And then the way that I play Magyars is to make sure that they can't full wall by quickly sending forward usually 2 villagers, one to build gates through the corner of their palisade walls or through their houses so that they can't wall behind. Because again, this unit is incredibly strong at breaking walls. It actually does more damage to walls than like longswords, which is pretty crazy because of its high attack speed. And so I'll build gates through walls to make it so they can't wall behind. And then the other vill will build a siege workshop and get 1 mangonel out, mostly just to open them and allow me to get in. The only reason why this isn't higher and maybe should actually be here is just because it has a bit of a scaling composition like all cavalry. It's quite weak to monks. When they get a monk out, you don't feel super comfortable fighting it. But the really nice thing about Magyar Hussar is, again, they're much faster than a knight. They have much higher attack value than a knight, and they're much cheaper than a knight. And all 3 of these reasons means that if they get like 1-2 monks out, we can just kill those monks. Like if they try to convert us and they're a little bit too far from their TC, Magyar Hussar can actually, if you have like 2 Magyar Hussar, it's actually more likely than not that they will get 0 conversions if they're not garrisoning in their TC. Because we're so fast, we get to them so quickly and deal so much damage. So monks are not as hard of a counter, and if the game does extend and they're on heavy monks, like just clawing their way, they eventually got to redemption monks against our Magyar Hussar plus Mangonel, we will just get heresy, and the game will probably be over for them at that stage. So this is what I would call a neutral scaling composition, where as the game moves on, we feel kind of okay. but not great. Not like a positive scaling composition like these two. Yeah, so Magyars, this is probably my favorite FC at the moment. Just the unit is so powerful, so fast, so easy to play. This is probably one of the FCs I'd recommend if you were trying to learn FCs, especially at lower elos of the game. This FC would get better the lower you are, but it's still an S tier FC all the way up to top 50. The only downside and the reason why you don't see me playing it as much is because it is quite weak to counter FC. So if you're fighting people who are going FC, Redemption Monks every single game, counter FC Redemption Monks, or counter FC Mangudai or counter FC Conquistadors, you're not going to feel like the Magyars is that great. But against some counter FCs, it is actually incredible. I recently played a game, I think it was versus Monos, where you just went like blind counter FC into War Wagon, and I just beat that just with like playing straight Magyars. It's an incredibly strong cab unit. The best way to think about a Magyars is it's a knight that is better. Whatever a knight is weak to, it is better against that. If a knight's weak to pikes, a Magyars is better. If a knight's weak to camels, a Magyars is better versus camels. If a knight's weak to monks, a Magyars is better versus monks. If a knight's weak to a cav archer unit, a Magyars is much better. That's actually the matchup where it actually becomes much, much better because it's faster than a cav archer unit. So again, whatever a knight's weak to, Magyars will be less weak to. Okay, let's move on to Bulgarians. This is another sneaker pick, another civ that I theory crafted for KOTD, but never actually sent out to the folks that I was coaching. But in my playtesting versus other high-level players on KOTD generations, Bulgarians were actually quite strong. I'm not going to put them in S tier, don't worry. I'm not that crazy. I would say on standard Arabia, Bulgarians are, probably here. Probably like a mid A tier strategy. We are going for a 23 pop FC into Conic. The really nice thing is usually we have to send either 5 or maybe 6 to stone. With Bulgarians, we get to only send like 3 to stone when we're doing our FC. This means that we'll have basically +3 vills or +2 vills on like wood and berries, which means we'll either get to wall more or just have a much more consistent FC. We'll always get perfect times, like perfect 14s when we're playing Bulgarians. So their eco bonus is that they don't need as much stone because if you don't know what a crate post is, it's basically a half-price castle. So that's really nice. And yeah, they're incredibly resistant to feudal pressure. The unit, the Conic, is actually pretty solid, especially when you consider that we'll probably have first and maybe even second armor upgrade on it, which is not typical for most cab units. We usually don't get any armor upgrades with cab units, but because they have those half price, the unit stats kind of get inflated. And then if they do extend their time in feudal and spam a lot of spears, when the unit dies, it will turn into a infantry unit, and that's actually pretty good because often they play spear defense at home while like trying to pressure us forward with archers, and suddenly their spear defense at home doesn't really make that much sense. So again, really solid unit. The downsides are that it has a scaling problem. It has a negative scaling composition. Its unit is quite expensive. Something you can do that is not a joke, and I've done it in testing games versus very high level players. Like I think I did this versus Dragonstar and some KOTD testing. Is that you can delete your Conics if they do eventually get to Redemption Monks to counter both your Conics and your Mangonels. You can delete whatever Conics you have left over. Hopefully you don't have to delete them. Hopefully you've just been saving the infantry units while the Conics have been dying, and then play something like Siege Tower Dismounted Conic to answer that comp. It would only make sense if they're in a very precarious position where like they have like 3 Redemption Monks and nothing else. That's the only time that makes sense. You can just end the game right there by getting a Siege Tower plus Dismounted Conic, or you can go into Longsword plus. This would be the more reasonable approach. Longsword plus Siege Tower versus if they do get to Redemption. And that's why its scaling isn't that brutal, because we can get onto an answer to Redemption Monk, which is the main thing that we're worried about fighting. Okay, let's move on to Saracens. Where do I want to place them? It's either C or it's probably C. I'll put them at the top of C for now. So Saracens, FC into Mameluke is okay-ish. Kind of bad. Saracens have a really good FC bonus. They get some wood savings on their market. That's a great bonus. And they also have better market prices. Another great bonus for FCing. 2 good bonuses for FCing. The only problem with the Saracens is the unit that comes out of the castle is quite weak versus feudal archers. But luckily it is quite fast. Mameluke is basically like a range 3, 8 damage. It's kind of similar. It's like a throwing axeman on a camel, and it has a lot of bonus damage versus feudal scouts or mounted units in general. They're not going to open feudal scouts versus you. If they do, they could easily lose the game on the spot, as long as you play something like Mangonel, like fast forward siege workshop into plus Mameluke and get into their base quickly. They're only going to have a small number of archers or cav archers if they're at that stage, and you'll just be able to run them over with your Mameluke ball. So that's why it's scary. If they open the wrong thing, if they open scouts in feudal age, they can lose the game kind of on the spot there. 2 equal skill opponents, I think if you open the wrong thing versus this FC, you're dead. There's a lot of FCs in the game that are like that. Like, yeah. If you open the wrong thing, you're in trouble. Like if you open, whatever, archers versus Romans, you could lose the game on the spot. That's very bad for you. Okay, we've been talking for a while. Yeah, the main problem is that Mamelukes don't really contribute in the coming crossbow Mangonel versus Mameluke Mangonel war that's about to come inevitably, and they don't really contribute to that. They can maybe raid, or maybe if the crossbow counts are thin enough, they could dive the Mangonel, but they don't really contribute if your opponent's playing well. So that's why they're weak. They have a negative scaling composition. But as long as you're able to hit them with those timings and break in, you're going to feel okay. It's also quite expensive and weak to Redemption Monks. And you don't have any answer to that. I didn't mention that. Okay, let's move on to Persians. So Persians they're probably Berbers, Sicilians, Poles. Okay, yeah, probably like, I don't know, here. We're just going to play him as like a Huang Rush Civ. We're not going to go for War Elephants. War Elephants are the definition of a negative scaling composition. If they ever get a monk on the field, the game is over if you're doing an all-in with War Elephants. So that doesn't feel great because high-level players will be able to stall, wall, keep your War Elephants out, and keep you from destroying their TC before they're in Castle Age, versus any opening that they do. So War Elephants, I've done it before. I think I once even beat like a 2K3 player with FC War Elephants, but that was because he chose to extend his time in Feudal Age instead of stealing to Castle Age, which is what he should have done. So we are just going to play a Huang Rush with Persians, and Persians have pretty good bonuses for a Huang Rush, and I've talked about the limitations of Huang Rush. So I'd put it here, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, probably like here-ish. But Huang, it can be very solid for that. They actually have pretty good bonuses for that. The bonus attack on knights, the more res, the faster working TCs. Okay, Aztecs. This is an interesting one. Where do I want to put them? Put them at the bottom of B tier. The recent buffs to Jaguar Warriors that take them from a 10 attack unit to a 16 attack, I think now, unit. It's pretty crazy. The only problems is that this unit is still weak to, the things it was always weak to, which is ranged units. It's quite slow. It can kind of get chased down on the map. Anytime we have an infantry unit that can kind of get chased down on the map, we feel pretty uncomfortable playing it out of our castle, because if they open archers, when we try to do that raiding victory condition right at the start, they might just kill our units, which sucks, especially when they cost a lot of food. This unit's quite expensive. So for those reasons, it's not super hot. But if you ever do get to something like Siege Tower plus Jaguar Warrior or Siege Tower Jaguar Warrior Mangonel, you can really effectively either defend your own siege or snipe enemy siege with the Siege Towers versus Crossbow Mangonel. So that's why it's okay. It has an okay scaling. We don't usually play with the Aztec monks too much in this composition. We'd rather be playing Siege Towers and Mangonels. But yeah. It's okay, and it's quite fun to play, so let's put it in the bottom of B tier. Okay, Koreans. Koreans are another S tier strategy, and we got our 4th S tier here. They are incredibly powerful. The War Wagon, it has like 150 HP. It has 5 pierce armor because we get our armor upgrades for free. It deals 9 damage. Basically, this thing, the way that I use it is like a melee unit. I don't get any ranged upgrades, which is great. You don't want to, in all-ins, you prefer if your unit doesn't need any upgrades. I don't get any ranged upgrades, And I just, if they're on whatever, archers or skirmishers, I'll just run right next to them and just shoot them and just rinse and repeat that. It's incredibly tanky. It obviously beats feudal scouts because it has 150 HP and deals 9 damage, and it's pretty fast. You're not gonna beat that with feudal scouts. And the only downside is that it's quite weak to like them getting mostly onto like redemption monk plus skirm, or just maybe straight redemption monk. But there are some nice things that you have going there. One, your cav archer unit, so if you do get your fletching and bodkin versus someone playing monks, you will be able to snipe them. And the other really nice thing is if they do play really heavy onto monks, we can always tech switch into Fire Lancer Siege Tower, which is a counter to monks, and also a counter to like skirm mangonel. So the reason why Koreans are here in the current patch is mainly because of their ability to tech switch out of the all-in and like counter the counter. On a future patch where maybe Fire Lancers and Siege Towers are not in the game, Koreans will fall pretty heavy, probably to the bottom of A tier, because they won't have any answer to redemption monks, sadly, when those units, in theory, get nerfed. So yeah, right now they're here a lot because of Fire Lancers. And actually, Fire Lancer Siege Tower is so strong that if people open scouts versus me, especially if they're like a camel civ, I'll just sell my stone and just play like straight Fire Lancer Siege Tower. You have to open archers versus me to get me to drop the castle. And if you open archers versus me, especially, then I'm just going to play, war wagons and run over your feudal archers. And if you open anything else versus me, I'll just play straight Siege Tower Fire Lancer. So pretty consistent SC. It's also good in counter FCs, which is really good for me. So yeah, very solid. Let's move on to Mayans. Very solid S tier. Mayans are boof. What do I want? I don't know which one I want. Yeah, we'll put them here. Mayans don't have a ton of FC options. It's either FC Eagle Warrior or FC into what are they called? Plumed Archers. Yes. Which is basically like a shorter range, more mobile crossbow. The more mobile is quite nice, which is why I'm ranking it a little higher than non-mobile crossbow or foot archer civs. It means that you can like open with a raiding victory condition versus a big ball of feudal archers. Really nice there. The downside is that it requires a lot of upgrades, and we have some scaling problems where it doesn't really, since it has less range, it doesn't really contribute too much into the coming like mangonel crossbow war. And Eagle Warriors are quite weak just in general for fast castles, mainly because they struggle versus a lot of openings, like man-at-arms and archer openings they struggle versus, and also like extended feudal scouts they struggle versus. Eagles do have an okay scaling composition of like Eagle Monk into like the Castle Age, but other than that, they're just not a super hot unit. They also have like some production time problems in that they take a long time to make. So I'd personally go for Plumed Archers, and it is not a very good FC because it requires a lot of upgrades and doesn't really do anything as the game scales on, in terms of like pushing through your opponent's base. It's not the hottest unit to do that. Okay, Incas. We got probably a B for sure. High B, low A. Oh goodness, what did I do? I messed around with crap. I don't remember where this was, but I'll put it there-ish. I hope that's where it was. Okay, Incas. Yeah, I'm gonna put them in mid B, I think. Probably above Burgundians. So right now, Incas have actually a really nice scaling composition in that they can play Siege Tower Kamayuk, which is actually solid, quite solid. They also have some really good bonuses for getting to Castle Age. And even if the Siege Towers do eventually get nerfed, they will be able to play Ram Kamayuk and be pretty solid as well. That is a pretty solid scaling option. But yeah, they have a lot of bonuses for getting to Castle Age. Their unit is fairly cheap on the infantry side, and it's not very fast, which is not good, which is why it's low. But it does deal actually quite a lot of damage to mounted units. It has bonus damage versus them. So if they ever try to like snipe our mangonels or our monks, we'll feel pretty good. And it also has like extended range. So we feel pretty good there. Yeah, the main weakness is versus like heavy feudal archer pressure. They have a big ball of archers and they're chasing down your Kamyuks while you try to like open with a raid to get your siege workshop forward. You could be in a lot of trouble playing this, and that's why they're not higher. Even though they do have a really nice bonus for getting to Castle Age and getting the castle up, and also they have some nice scaling also. Okay, Britons. This one's very interesting. This is the most unique fast castle probably on this entire tier list, because Britons play like none of these fast castles play. Britons are the one fast castle that I do where I do not push. And this is why I don't really like it that much. But every single fast castle here, I'm trying to kill my opponent. I'm trying to go forward, kill all their villas, walk all their villas, have them all garrisoned in TC, and then eventually destroy the TC. I'm trying to deal a lethal amount of damage to the game, end the game very quickly. My games are incredibly short. And like 1/3 the normal game length of most people. So Britons is not that. Britons, the way that I play them, they have an incredibly difficult time walking across the map because their foot archer unit is not only very slow, but also it micros very poorly. So if they're going extended feudal scouts or extended feudal archers, you're just going to get picked off on the map. I promise. You will not be able to walk across the map, even though you have more range than those feudal archers. They're just going to walk next to you and then shoot you. And if you try to shoot them back, you're just slowing yourself down from running away from the big ball of feudal archers. So yeah, really no way to walk across the map as Britons, but they can do something like castle drop into more TCs and boom with defensive longbow. And that play is actually solid. Like I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. They have a really good bonus for booming. Their unit actually does scale on the defensive. It's actually kind of hard to think of what you do with like against longbows sitting under a castle and just chilling. Like I could think of what to do versus longbow, like pushing forward. Like you could go for a lot of knights and surround them, but under a castle, you can't really do that. So yeah, they do have some nice scaling on the defense. And yeah, it's the one castle, like FC on this entire list where I do not push when I play Britons. So it's a boom FC, very unique, but also fairly strong. It has some good scaling. And they have some okay bonuses for getting a castle age as well with their faster working sheep. Okay, Huns. Huns, I go for Tarkans. And this is a solid FC. Definitely above, honestly, above, yeah, these ones for sure. Probably even above there. It's a solid FC. The Tarkan has been buffed a lot in recent patches. It actually does quite a bit of damage to buildings. And the way that I play Tarkans is, I do my 23 pop FC. I go forward. Let's say there's a lot of whatever barracks. They're going to go for pikemen. I'll wind and bind them. You basically do the raiding victory condition where you send some Tarkans and draw the spears back. And then the really unique thing that you can do with Tarkans is if you've split your Tarkans, half of them are drawing the spears back, half of them are on the front. You can just kill the barracks that they're making the spears out of. Tarkans deal so much damage to buildings that you can just kill it. And if they ever try to steal, which is basically go up very fast with very little feudal army and then play redemption monks, you can just dive the TC because they have pretty good pierce armor and then just destroy the monasteries. And they won't be able to play that composition if they don't have the buildings for it. So that's a kind of interesting thing. The downside of Tarkans is their attack value is very weak. So they're quite weak to camels and knights, and also spears versus spears, but they are fairly cheap as well. Not super cheap, but fairly cheap. And they have a good pierce armor. So it's an okay FC, not great. The unit's not that great, and that's the main problem. It also runs into scaling compositions if you're not able to get into your opponent's base, where their redemption monks are going to just absolutely slap you. Okay, speaking of redemption monks slapping a unique unit, let's talk about the Slavs. So Slavs are not good. Probably a D tier strategy. Probably worse than Teutons. They have cheaper siege, so they got to be a little better than Biz. But yeah, they're just going to play a basic Huang Rush. They have some okay bonuses for this. They have cheaper siege. They have faster working farms. You don't place that many farms in a Huang Rush, so it's not that great. But their unique unit, the I'm going to forget the name of their unique unit, but the really tanky melee cav unit isn't that good because it's fairly expensive, fairly slow. It does have a high attack value, which is kind of nice for defending siege and monks versus light cav, but you're just going to lose to someone who gets to castle age and spams a lot of monks, or spams a lot of spears. But the spears, you'd prefer that they were spamming that, because then you could mix siege. Versus redemption monks, you can't really do anything. So that feels uncomfortable. But if they don't have redemption monks, they're not a redemption monk civ. It's funny, my brain usually assumes that my opponents have redemption monk civs, because people counterpick me with redemption monk civs and usually just counter fast castle me with those civs. But if they don't have that, then you could play like siege plus knight or plus your unique unit, and it would be okay. But cab unique units are uniquely bad at defending siege because of their high cost. So if your opponent runs in and then converts with the monks, we've talked about this before, they'll get a ton of conversions on your cab units, and there's no way to nothing you can do to solve that. Anyway, so yeah, a really weak FC. Let's move on to Cumans. Cumans are, I go for the kip check with Cumans. It's not as weak as you might imagine. It's actually a pretty solid FC, mostly because, again, it's kind of in the, like, you know, the Oregon gun conquistador line, in that it kind of gets ballistics for free, in that the bonus shots will miss often and hit grouped up like archer units. So you kind of get ballistics for free, and for that reason, I often feel like I only need fletching to beat like someone going extended feudal archer. I just need fletching and a good number of kip checks, and they're quite fast, so they can get close to the archers and then dodge their shots. Oh boy, the voice is going, guys. We're gonna get there. So a very solid FC. I would probably place it in, probably above these. So middle of B tier. Not a bad FC. You also have, if you ever want to get bloodlines on the units, cheaper stable, which doesn't come up too much. And then what you're going to play, Mangonel plus Kipchak versus like crossbow Mangonel. That's usually what they're going to counter you with. You actually feel like you can contribute there. If you guys haven't teased out the thread here, if your unit is able to contribute somehow to like a siege war, either by like putting it in a siege tower and going and sniping siege, or like shooting the Mangonel, like a Conchwood and killing it. If it can't contribute, it's probably going to be a weak FC. If it can contribute, it's going to be a fairly decent FC. And Kipchaks can contribute. In the pre-ballistics window, they can like strafe and then shoot the Mangonel, and then strafe and shoot it again and probably kill it, because they actually deal quite good damage to Mangonels. So it's not a bad FC, entirely solid, and it will, obviously it's entirely unexpected. No one expects FC Kipchak. It will be weak to like extended feudal archer or like heavy feudal archer pressure, but it'll be really strong versus like scouts into steel, which is where they like only make 3 scouts and then full wall and go to castle age. And you'll feel really strong there playing, Kipchak Mangonel versus whatever they're getting into, crossbow Mangonel or Cav Archer Mangonel. Let's move on to Tatars, another really solid FC. I'm gonna probably put this probably at the tippy top of B tier. So the Keshik is a crazy unit. Tatars also have an incredible FC bonus. Their sheep last a lot longer, which means we'll always have like a smooth FC. And then the Keshik, against any form of heavy feudal pressure, it's just going to clean up whatever they're throwing at you. If they're throwing, feudal archers and spears together, the Keshik's going to clean that up. It just has a ton of HP. It's quite fast, and it's quite cheap, and it produces fairly quickly. So like just a crazy unit in general. And the only reason why this isn't higher, if we feel really comfortable versus feudal openings, why is it so weak? Well, it's weak in that all melee units are weak to, full base walls. If we don't get in with any melee unit, we usually feel a little bit uncomfortable. So it's not the best at breaking walls, but it is fast. Anytime a unit is fast, that means it can often get forward before their full base walls are completed. So it's not the worst at breaking. But the main problem is that when we play Keshik plus Mangonel, again, we're going to be weak to like either Monk Knight or straight Redemption Monk. We won't have a great answer to defend our siege. We'll have to, of course, mix monks. That's the thing that I haven't really talked about. But in all-ins, we don't have a ton of resources to mix units like this. So often we have to skip the monks if we've taken some feudal damage. And that makes us weak to that sort of dive with the knights. But it is really solid. I want to be very clear. Like anything in the B tier or above, I'd say B tier, you could like consider this like equal skill. Like this is like an equal skill matchup where it's like a 50-50 or a toss-up. And then this is like for you to win. This is like higher skill. Like they have to be higher skill than you to win this matchup. Any of these matchups, they're going to have to be a better player than you to beat you. And then this is like they have to be a much better player. That's how I'd kind of see these. And then these, you could be like worse and, you know, much worse. So that's kind of how I, and like you should, even if you're fighting a much worse player than you, you could easily lose playing like Biz Huang Rush, in my opinion. Especially if you're not versed in Huang Rushing, which I'm not. But yeah, so like, just to be very clear, if you are fighting an equal skilled player, going for like FC Keshik, and if you know how to FC, obviously if you don't know how to FC, none of this makes any sense. But if you do practice FCs for a while, usually it takes like a month to learn how to do 23 pop FCs. But if you do commit that month, suddenly you'll have access to, you know, something that's, you know, better than 50%. And especially if you have like a rough matchup, suddenly FC Keshik looks very real. Again, very strong FC, should not be understated. Okay, Mongols. This is a really interesting one. They have a really nice Huang Rush with like steps and mangonels. But I actually like to play them with the castle drop. And it's pretty solid. I'm gonna put it right there, kind of at the bottom of A tier. Mangudai are not like the best unit to go for out of a castle because they have long production time, which is not great. When you're doing an all-in, you'd much prefer a lower production time. But the really nice thing about the Mongols is that they have an enormous hunt bonus. I think it gets you like plus 300 food at the start of the game. And because of that, you can like, put 6 on stone every single time. And you'll always get like a perfect 14, which is like the perfect time off of a 23. And because of that, they're going to hit their timing every single time. And it's going to be basically impossible to disrupt a Mongol player going for an FC, like a 23 castle drop FC. So they'll always get to that castle at a good time. And they'll often even have some food left over, like to get fletching and bodkin, which is really solid. Having food left over to get fletching and bodkin, because if you can't get fletching and bodkin with Mangudai, then you will be able to like push back feudal archers pretty nicely. And then they have really good rating potential. They obviously have one of the best scaling potentials in the game. Mangudai are just like an overpowered unit, just like conks and, you know, or organ guns, things like that. So yeah, they scale real nicely. And in the coming like crossbow Mangonel war versus Mangudai Mangonel, the crossbow player actually starts to feel incredibly uncomfortable as long as you have some decent micro. So yeah, really solid FC. It checks out. It's real good. All right, let's move on to another, man, where do I put it? I'm making this not for me. See, for me, Hindustanis get demoted a little bit because they're weak to counter FC Redemption Monk. But for most other players who aren't fighting that, for everyone else who doesn't just get blind counter FC'd every single game, where would they be? I feel like they would be up here. Yeah, I think they're slightly better than Magyars if you're not getting blind counter FC every single game. So yeah, Gulam is an absolutely insane unit. If you look at the stats, you'll realize it's just a better longsword. It's a longsword with like a ton of pierce armor, a ton more speed, and it deals like splash damage. So just like, and it also is heavier on gold, which is really good for fast castles because we often don't have a really good food economy. So again, just like an incredibly overstated unit when you compare it to like what it compares to, which is a longsword. And it does the same attack as a longsword. It's actually better versus melee units than the longswords. Again, because of the lower gold cost, and because of the pass-through damage is great in this patrol stacking meta. All these things, and it gets to play a really good composition. It's also much better at defending monks because of its speed from like light cav or knights. Than longswords are. So a lot of good reasons why this is just a better longsword. That -1 melee armor, don't even worry about it. You won't even notice it. So yeah. And you're going to play a scaling composition of like Gulam plus monk versus pretty much anything your opponent's going to throw at you. Yeah, and it's fast, so it can get forward quickly, start breaking easily. Basically, you kind of play like we played with Goths. These two are actually quite similar, but this unit is just better. It's cheaper. Produces faster, It's just better. And you're just gonna like right click on their farms, or their TC. You're gonna force a fight that way with your Gulams. Again, you can be under a TC to force a fight with this unit because that's high pierce armor. And then you're either just gonna loop around their town center, destroying all their farms with like your monks and your Gulams destroying the farms, or you're gonna just destroy the town centers straight if you have enough Gulams to do that. There's no true answer to this. Feudal units don't really work. If they do extended feudal scouts, again, they're fighting a better longsword with feudal scouts. Doesn't feel too hot for them. So yeah, just a crazy unit. Okay, let's move on to Gurjaras. Oh boy, where would I rank these guys? Honestly, here. This unit, I am gonna go for. Gurjaras really have nothing to go for in the FC except their castle unit, which is not a good unit to go for, which is why they're so low on the tier list. So yeah, Gurjaras, we're going to be going for that chakram thrower. It is a fast infantry unit with a very low attack value. That's the main problem with this unit. It's most comparable, I'd say, to like a Gebetto, but a Gebetto has a high attack value, which is good, and this is bad. The really nice thing though is that it deals pass-through damage and full pass-through damage, so it actually scales better than Gebetto do versus like once you get your full upgrades versus like crossbow. So Gebetto would really struggle and also have a much better frame data to like micro it versus crossbow. This is actually kind of like a soft counter to crossbow. This is like hard countered by crossbow. So you can scale there nicely. The main problem though is versus feudal units, you're much worse than a Gebetto. And usually we care about like the early matchups first and we think about the scaling matchups later. Like we should weight the early matchups first. So yeah, the fact that you lose to like, like the first knight that gets on the field because you only deal 1 damage per shot. And often you're going to struggle to afford even forging in a 23 pop FC. So like, yeah, that's a big problem. Basically you have to transition into like a chakram thrower plus monk plus siege push, and it's actually an okay push. It's not super obvious what you'd answer that push with. I'd say like just spam a bunch of light cav. I don't deal that much damage, but people often don't do that because light cav have 0 melee armor and they do take some damage from these units. But yeah, it has surprisingly good scaling. That's the one thing I can say about this. For such a bad unit versus feudal units, it scales surprisingly okay if you can get on monk, chakram. Magno. Obviously, we're going to lose to a Redemption Monk Civ, but we're going to lose to a lot more with chakrams, I promise. You're going to lose to everything on the field. It's not that good. Okay, let's move on to Dravidians. This is a solid FC. I definitely prefer it over all of these. Ooh. Very interesting. I'll put it here. So Dravidians, we're going to be playing like a Rumi Swordsman, which comes out of the castle. It's a melee unit that deals like a splash damage, like a high attack value splash damage attack, which is pretty crazy for a unit. The only downside is it's fairly expensive. It's on the more expensive side for an infantry unit. It also doesn't move that fast. It's pretty speedy, but not crazy. And worse than that, it has very low pierce armor. So it will die very quickly to archer units and not a ton of HP. So yeah, this unit really struggles versus like aggressive archer openings. But the really nice thing there is that if you ever do get to siege tower plus a Rumi Swordsman, you will just flatten all the archers. Now, again, siege towers are most likely going to be nerfed quite soon, maybe even in like 10 days. So when that happens, this FC is going to probably go down at least a tier, I'd say, when siege towers probably no longer do what they do right now. But in the current meta, if you ever get to siege tower plus a Rumi, it's actually quite difficult for your opponent to answer, especially if you mix a monk or two. But even without the monk, like that high burst damage makes it hard for the knights to approach whatever your mangonels or whatever you're protecting with that siege tower. And if they are on archers, you can just like roll up to them, hop out, slap them, and hop back in, and like all the archers are dead. So that's why it has some nice scaling, probably a positive scaling composition. But unfortunately, the unit just isn't very good at breaking. It's not too fast, so it's not good at getting in that opening raiding victory condition. Remember, we should always think about our first victory conditions first and the scaling victory conditions later. That first victory condition of getting in and raiding, it's not super good at. But Dravidians have a very nice bonus for FCing. So it's definitely higher than Celts, even though maybe Celt unit is better at playing its first victory condition. But let's move on. Here we go. Another easy, I'm sure a lot of people know me for this civilization. That probably a lot of people know me for a lot of civilizations. But definitely this is probably one of them. That's the Bengalis. Since I'm making this FC for like generally a wide audience, people who aren't going to get counter FC'd every game, this is definitely the best FC in the game. If you're another top 500 player who's just like, I want to try an FC. The main reasons why Bengalis is so strong is because if we think about its feudal matchups, the Ratha, it just absolutely destroys everything in feudal. So if they go feudal archers, this is a cav archer with double HP, Parthian tactics for free, and it also has a knight mode to like counter skirmishers. Oh my goodness, that's a crazy unit. It can just turn into a better, like kind of a wood gold knight, and just like counter its counters, which is great. I love countering my counters. So it's really great. And then of course Bengalis have a pretty solid FC bonus in that they get more vills. And then they also have a really good monk tech tree, so you can play things like Ratha Monk Castle Drop. That's the comp that I play sometimes, or just like Ratha Castle Drop. Usually just focus on the Ratha Castle Drop or Ratha Mangonel. That's a very common composition I play. It's incredibly good at breaking because it's a knight that can like shoot at the vills that are trying to wall you out. So the weakness of all melee units, as I mentioned earlier, is getting full walled out. This no longer has that weakness. It no longer has the weakness to getting like res walled out. Another weakness of melee units no longer has that weakness. It also costs wood and gold, and yeah, moves really fast. I mean, what's not to say? It deals splash damage. You can't patrol stack against it. Freaking yeah, it's a crazy unit. I'm very I expect nerfs to come to this unit, and I'll be celebrating them when they do. People often think I would be sad to see the Ratha nerfed, but if you remember that I said I pretty much exclusively play versus counter fast castles, and mostly counter fast castles of strategies that I've made, I have to fight Ratha a lot, and I don't like doing it. Like if I'm playing Bulgarians because I want to have a good time, and someone counter fast castles me with Ratha, I feel uncomfortable and a little bit sad. I don't like it when that happens. Okay, so let's move on. Absolutely S tier. The compositions you're going to play are like Mangonel Ratha, that's your most common one, or Redemption Monk Ratha, or Ratha Castle Drop, or Monk Castle Drop. We're not going to get into when you make those decisions to decide between those different compositions, but absolutely crazy unit. There's really no counter to the unit. That's the main problem, because if skirmishers ever walk onto the map, you will just kill them. The skirm player has to stay under their TC all the time, and you can exploit that in many different ways. Okay, let's move on to Khmer. Ooh, I love this. I recently have fallen in love with the Khmer. I'm going to rate them right here. The Khmer have a crazy 23 pop plus loom castle fast castle build, which is the exact same build I use for most of these for like these unique unit builds. But the really unique thing about the Khmer is that they get to click up instantly off of that build. They don't go onto stone. I'm not playing the Blitzed Elephant. I want to be very clear. It's basically the exact same build as a lot of these, except instead of like 5 or maybe 6 on stone, I just send, I think it is 3 onto gold. And then I click instantly, and I instantly place a tower on my gold, which I usually have located near a wood. And then I play, usually if I'm playing seriously, I'll play into Knights and Siege off of like a really blistering fast time. Or I'll play Elephants and Siege, which is the cool way of playing it. That's actually my personal favorite. Anyway, that FC bonus is crazy. It saves you a ton of wood, and it gets you a faster time. So just absolutely crazy. And it's really solid. If your opponent isn't expecting it, they have to like instantly full wall, get a ton of spears on the map to stop your knights from raiding them to death. And then the siege is already up and in their face because of all the wood saving bonus. Like, what do you do against that? Again, it's going to hit them at like, it's 2 vills faster than a 1430. So it's going to hit them at 1310. You're going to be in Castle Age at 1310 with a stable already made and producing knights. You can get 2 stables too. So pretty crazy. Let's move on to the Malay. Oh boy, this is I don't know if I've talked this long in my life. It's kind of hard to do this, but I'm pushing through. Okay, the Malay. This is like a really solid fast castle. The main weakness of it is the main weakness of all melee units, which is full walls. You know, the Karambit Warrior, which is the thing we're going for, has really good pierce armor. It has 3 base pierce, and it's quite fast, so it can actually kill feudal archers if they're on the map. But of course, usually I open with a raid, and then I'll kill the feudal archers later. So I open with a raid, and then I kill the feudal archer. Yeah, get to the archers later, and it has a nice scaling composition, which is either like Karambit plus Monk if they're going into Knights, which are a pretty good. Knights are a pretty good answer to Karambit. Or Karambit Siege Tower plus Mangonel if they're going into like Crossbow Mangonel. And again, Crossbow are quite a good answer to the Malay. But yeah, what should I say about this? You have to go up slower than a normal fast castle. Normal fast castles are 23s. This one I do is a 27 to kind of leverage the eco bonus. It's not a big deal. It feels super smooth. It always feels like you're able to get a good castle time. And yeah, the unit's crazy. It just shuts down any feudal pressure that you're receiving. It just destroys feudal scouts, by the way. And it's quite fast, and actually, in terms of resources spent, it has quite a high effective attack value, so it's actually pretty good at defending siege versus knights. It's okay. It's not great, because there's some facing issues where the units bump on each other, but we don't really need to talk about that. Where do I want to put them? Definitely, yeah. There we go. They're a high A tier FC. That's absolutely for sure. Here we go. Vietnamese. This is an interesting one. They are solid, mostly because of their Fire Lancer Siege Tower play. But Fire Lancer Siege Tower is a little weak. This would be like a 23 non-castle drop where you're placing usually a tower on your gold. It is a little weak to heavy feudal archers and towers. So I can't rank it too highly. I'm going to rank it here, like the middle of B tier. Yeah, you know, Koreans are so highly rated because if someone does try to like pressure me in feudal age, especially with heavy archer pressure, I'm just going to place my castle. I'm not going to sell my stone. I'm just going to place my castle and play war wagons. But Vietnamese don't have a convenient answer to that. So if someone does pressure you at home, you kind of have to like place your siege workshop at home. And if you guys don't know what it means to place your siege workshop at home when you're trying to do an all-in, a lot of even high-level players don't know what that means, but it usually means you've lost the game. Just want to be very clear. Unless you're playing Romans or Shu, those are the only 2 civs that I feel comfortable placing a siege workshop at home. If I do it with any other civ in the game, I feel as though I'm really far behind. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And if you watch pro players trying fast castles at a high level, often they do place the siege workshop at home, and I just tell you as a viewer, watch how many of those games they win. It's a very small percentage versus when they place their siege workshop forward. So anytime you're forced to place a siege workshop at home, I'm not going to get into why this is, but you're in a very bad position. But you can play. The nice thing about placing a siege workshop at home with Koreans is if you get them into your Fire Lancers into a siege tower, they can chase down the archers on the map and kill them, which is not usually true of placing a siege workshop and like making mangonels. So that is the one nice thing, and that's why they're in the middle of B tier. Ooh, we got our next S tier. Yeah, they're here. So another middle of S tier. This is the Georgians. Again, this is a Fire Lancer FC. Our best comp thing that we can be playing is Siege Tower Fire Lancer. But the question is, how do we resist feudal archer pressure if we're trying to angle towards that FC? And the Georgians have a really easy answer to feudal archer pressure, especially heavy feudal archer pressure, in the Grenadier. Think of it like a mangonel that like has spread. So it is really hard to dodge it because it has like random spread on its shot. And if you do hit with it, you're going to flatten all their archers. So the moment you get like 3 Grenadiers on the field, if they have 20 feudal archers, they're terrified of you. You will flatten all of the archers with like even that small of a number. And they have an incredible FC bonus. So really powerful FC bonus. I do it as a 23. I place, often the tower on my gold versus heavy archer pressure. And then I just make Grenadiers and Fire Lancers. And then once I thin down their archer numbers, I'll just play towards a really nice scaling composition, which will be Fire Lancer plus Siege Tower. And if they don't have too many archers on the field, they won't be able to answer this. And that's why it's an S tier composition. The Grenadiers thin the archers, get you to high Fire Lancer numbers, and then you play like rocket cart, fire lancer, siege tower versus anything that they're gonna do. Super powerful. When siege towers eventually get nerfed, this will probably drop down a tier. Just to be very clear. Actually, you know what? Grenadier Fire Lancer is still quite strong. It might just drop like to the bottom of S. It might not drop actually that far, but it will drop down a little. Teutons. These guys, FC Liao Dao is okay. Mostly because of the siege tower and how they two-shot archer units, which are the main counter to the Liao Dao. The Liao Dao is like a super tanky, pretty cheap, like anti-melee unit. It does like 18 damage base, which is actually like more than a, I don't know why they built a melee unit that does more damage than a Shotel warrior, but it does do more damage than a Shotel warrior. So if you ever get these guys in siege towers, you're not going to really have, they're not going to have any answer to that unless they have a big ball of like crossbow. So you're playing towards that or Fire Lancer Siege Tower. Either of them are good. Probably Fire Lancer Siege Tower is a little better. And I'd rank them probably slightly lower than Vietnamese. These two civs I'm going to play very similar. But you can't go for a castle drop with these guys. That's the one difference. By the way, I don't like Rattan castle drop. I didn't really talk about why, but for many reasons, it's not super solid. It's okay. It's probably in a similar position. Actually, both of these, you can either choose Fire Lancers or your castle drop, and they're going to be in a fairly similar position. Okay, Chinese. Definitely got a high A tier, that's for sure, or at least a mid. Yeah, we'll put them there. Chinese. This is, in meta play, it's like the best civ in the game. But in anti-meta play, it's actually pretty solid as well. The Chukanu gets a lot of upgrades for free. It has an enormous amount of like base attack. And also like when you play towards the scaling composition, which is like Chukanu Mangonel versus Crossbow Mangonel, the Chukanu really do contribute to that because you can really quickly, if you have like even 5 Chukanu, like with Fletching and Bodkin, you can really quickly snipe your opponent's Mangonels. So your opponent always has to respect this play. The downside is that it can be weak to like an extended feudal archer because you're the same speed as archers. We've talked about this before with like Janissaries. And any foot archer unit that isn't fast, they can get chased down on the map. So that's the main reason why it's not higher, but it has good scaling, probably positive scaling. And you have a great eco bonus for fast castling with the Chinese. Okay, here we go. You got a smile on my face. This is one of my favorite FCs. It might be my favorite. Either this or Magyars is my favorite. But it's the Burmese. I usually put this right here, right at the top of A tier. It is a incredibly terrifying fast castle to fight. The Rambai is such a powerful unit. Most people would kind of laugh if I said that. It's not seen as very powerful in the meta, but for anti-meta play, it is absolutely great. Like really exceptional. The main reason is because the moment that you get like 3 Rambai, no matter how many feudal archers they have, you will always be able to like micro and then shoot and just like flatten 2 archers. Micro, shoot, and they don't have any answer to this. They have to run back to their base or try to counterattack you and like force you to dance with them for a little while. But again, the Rambai has a very low accuracy, which means it has a lot of missed shots, missed shots are actually good in a fast castle context because it means you get basically ballistics for free. So they don't really like dancing with you, so they often play defensive, and then that allows you to bring your siege forward, and you play a Rambai Mangonel. And again, a Rambai have high attack values, so they can contribute to this coming like crossbow Mangonel versus a Rambai Mangonel war that's going to come. And until they get ballistics, they do not counter a unit. So just like Conks, this is why I see these two FCs as very similar. Just like Conks, they have to get ballistics, otherwise you will just win with your unit. Their crossbow don't counter you until they get ballistics. And the way that I play it is I usually try to break in and then do what's called a loop around their town center, which is basically where you just do a circle, run a circle with your units around their town center. This forces them either to run all their villagers to their town center, or it forces a fight between the crossbow and the Rambai. And again, until they get ballistics, we gain value from fights, so that will always be advantageous for us. So really solid FC, really fun FC, and honestly, like, I don't talk about this too much, but like in terms of power levels, this is like, I think the perfect power level for a fast castle to be at. Like it definitely has some, have some weaknesses. Like really heavy archer pressure can concern you, but that's mostly with like civs like Mongols or Khmer, or like really fast uptime civs, fast pressure civs. But like other than that, it doesn't have a ton of weaknesses. And yeah, I like an FC like this. And you do have to be a skilled FC player to like get a good time with them because they don't have a good bonus for fast castling. So pretty fair, but also incredibly powerful. They also have a nice scaling comp where if your opponent eventually does get to like ballistics crossbow or ballistics cav archers, you can switch into like Scorpion Redemption Monk, which is a pretty cool little way to end the game there. Okay, let's move on to something that's not so fair. We were talking about kind of fair but powerful FCs right for a second. Let's talk about something that's not fair. not even the slightest. Shu. Where are Shu? Shu, yeah, so I have to think about it. Shu are a little weak to counter fast castles, but again, this list is for just any high level player who your opponent won't blind counter fast castle you like they will with me. So I'm going to put Shu as the second highest FC in the game. War chariots are quite clunky, and they also have two different modes, which I'm not really going to get into this video. But let's just say most people have not fully realized how to use war chariots, and almost no one has realized how to use them in an FC. But I do a 21 pop, no loom FC with this guy, which is a blistering timing. And unless you're like one of the strongest scout civs in the game, you're going to feel incredibly uncomfortable playing feudal scouts versus this unit. And the kind of the trap that you've fallen into if you've opened feudal versus Shu is that you don't feel comfortable extending your feudal age versus them, but also your opponent, the Shu player, did a 21 pop FC, which is too fast for you to steal castle age with like full walls. And also this unit just absolutely destroys either houses or palisade walls. So like you're trapped and you've probably lost the game. And this is why this isn't that fair. Probably should be looked at. Although the very ironic thing is that this unit, the war chariot that I'm going for, is not seen as very powerful in the meta, and it isn't. But it's very powerful versus feudal units, and it has this tendency to trap your opponent into feudal play. So it's a brutal combination. And it's also hard to nerf this unit because, again, it's seen as quite weak right now, or not very strong if your opponent is in Castle Age, which is more of a standard game where you have the same tools available to you. And then the nice thing about Shu is if they ever do get to Castle Age, you have a neutral scaling composition where you'll play mangonels in front, war chariots behind just to zone any light cav or knights that might want to dive those mangonels. And then you'll just micro with your mangonels on the front versus their mangonels, and we feel pretty comfortable playing that because we have faster moving mangonels. So in theory, that should always be advantageous for us. And if they try to get onto Redemption Monks, we can play something like a really fast rush with like a Forward Siege Workshop and a Ram, and play like War Chariot Ram and rush their TC and like rush their monasteries, and they're not going to like that. So a lot of different ways you can play Shu, and all of them are good. Shu are quite good. That's why they're the second best civ in the game. Okay, let's move on to Wei. So Wei, yeah, where do I want to put them? I've recently played them. They didn't feel super hot. I'll put them like here. Wei, I'd say, are like a middling B tier. They have a pretty solid, unique unit in the Jianbei. I think that's what it's called. The guy who shoots a lot of arrows and is on a horse. I think they're called Jianbeis. I don't play them a ton. But the main thing about the Jianbei is that it is quite cheap on gold. It's a little heavy on wood, but it also has a pretty good production time. So I often play, when I play Wei, which I don't do that much. I've probably only played them like 6 or 7 times, which is not that many fast castles for me. Like if you want to know how many Bengali fast castles I have, it's probably like 500 or something, something crazy. But yeah, I've played them like 6 or 7 times. It feels really strong, mainly because that unit fires just kind of like a kip check. It fires a lot of shots that miss. And so if your opponent is stuck in feudal age with some feudal archers, there's no way for them to micro against you without getting hit. So that's the really powerful thing. And the moment that you get like 10 of these guys, you can like flatten a ball of feudal archers with just that charged attack. So pretty good. In terms of scaling, not the hottest scaling, in all honesty. Like they don't contribute the most to the crossbow mangonel fight, although they can kill the other crossbows somewhat effectively in the pre-ballistics timing. If you can't see a trend with a lot of these cav archer units, is that they love to play the pre-ballistics timing, because there's like no answer to these like high mischance cav archer units when your opponent doesn't have ballistics. Like you can just run around their base and kill all their villagers. If they try to stop you with a crossbow, you kill all the crossbow because their crossbow don't actually counter you yet. So we're exploiting that fact in a lot of these FCs to make the FC much more powerful. We're trying to force as many fights as we can before the pre-ballistic timing, before our opponent gets ballistics. Okay, let's move on to Wu. This FC I used to think was real solid. They've nerfed the Jian swordsman a couple times now, and I actually think it's fairly weak now. I think I'm going to put it top of B tier. It used to be much stronger, but yeah, it's just really not that solid of an all-in to go for, mainly because the infantry you're going for is quite expensive now. And it also doesn't, if we think about like what plays nicely with siege, we've talked about this before, you want high speed and high attack value. This unit is not fast and doesn't have a high attack value. It's an okay speed. It's like 1, which is like slightly faster than the longsword. Again, not super fast, not super high attack value. So if your opponent's playing like light cav monk versus your guys, even if they're like open feudal scouts and then just upgraded them to light cav, added a couple monks, and you're like on Jian swordsman Mangonel, you're going to feel a little uncomfortable defending those Mangonels versus that light cav. So for that reason, I usually don't play towards that. I play towards kind of a tankier siege unit, which would be a siege tower, but still they're not great at defending that. So I often, against like light cav monk, would play Jian swordsman plus siege tower, but they're just not super hot. The main weakness, again, low attack value, low speed, means they're kind of bad at breaking. They are doing a 21, which means they can hit some good timings, but also they are unique in that they're one of the few infantry units that we're going to go for that will also be weak to not only feudal scouts, which they are a little bit weak to now, but mainly man-at-arms and archer openings. If they keep making man-at-arms, they can just flatten you. So not super hot. I honestly might want to downgrade it a little bit further. Yeah, I'll just put it there. It's okay. Its main weakness is like walls. So on maps where there are fewer walls, like on KOTD Arabia, I rank this a lot higher, especially if there are fewer man-at-arms openings. Anyway, let's move on to the last FC in the game. We got it. We got there finally. The Japanese. I love this FC. It's so much fun to play. Samurai are so much fun to use. Where are they though? Yeah, I'll put them here. So kind of like middle of A tier. It is a really solid FC. They have a great eco bonus for getting to Castle Age, and then the composition that you're going to play is actually pretty brutal to fight. So you're going to play like Siege Tower Samurai, which can like dive archer units and kill archer units that are too far away from a town center. And also it's going to contribute a ton to like the Mangonel, the classic Mangonel crossbow versus Mangonel unique unit war that's about to happen. So they're going to contribute a lot there. It's also a fairly fast unit. There's an exploit in the game right now where you can select all your samurai, put them on stand ground, and then hit guard. And then they get their speed bonus. Maybe I shouldn't tell people this, but I've reported this a long time ago. Don't worry, folks. Both Survivalists and I have reported this to the devs. They'll get their speed bonus, so that you can like basically get a 1.25 movement speed samurai like right off the bat, as long as you have two units or more, and that can really help you get across the map quickly in raid. Actually, in all honesty, I sometimes do use that exploit, but in general, I don't, because it's too micro intensive and I don't have guard bound. Honestly, not that important to know, but it is kind of a funny thing to talk about here. The main reason why they're so solid is not because of that exploit. It's just because they have a fairly good scaling composition, and they're very cheap in terms of food. That's the main thing here. And they produce really quickly, which is quite nice. So you can really quickly get a bunch of fairly cheap units doing that raiding victory condition, and then we can play more towards like our siege tower and Mangonel kind of victory condition, or scaling composition. Yeah, I hope this conversation about all these different FCs was really kind of enlightening to y'all. I hope if you are a high level player and considering some fast castles, I have a lot of videos explaining like how I do these different fast castles, how I execute a 23. You can check those out on my Twitch channel. You're going to be looking for things like ! Build order and ! Placements. Those are kind of the beginner things that I tell people when they're learning my fast castles. But I have a lot of instructional content on like how as a high level player to learn these. If you can't tell, my main goal is to try to get more fast castles into the meta, especially the high level meta of Age of Empires. Just because, oh goodness, just because I love watching fast castles and playing fast castles and building fast castles. That's my favorite thing to do, honestly. It's very fun. Anyway, I hope this was useful, and maybe you'll consider playing a couple fast castles in your games, especially with like, I mean, who doesn't want to play fast castle samurai? Especially with like the units that you just love. Like I loved playing fast castle samurai, Ramurai, which is the composition you often play, Ram and Samurai, or like Magyars. So much fun to play. I really think it spices up the game and adds some really cool things. Yeah, Bulgarians, another thing I love. Anyway, this was a long video, but I hope y'all have a sense of the strength and weaknesses of different fast castle civs on Arabia, or really any open map. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Red Foz out.